Hello. Hi,
Quick.
gorgeous. Hi.
Hello. How you
How
doing?
wonderful.
Ooh,
Love your
mother is
earrings.
mothering. I was just about to say the same.
I just wore my little dainty ones this
Oh
time.
yeah. Real demure, real cutesy.
Didn't want to do too much, you know. The
Right.
earlobes, they're getting old, so we've got to protect them at all costs.
Keep
So,
it simple and elegant.
all right. Well, I'm going to do my little introduction, and then we will hop into it.
Sounds good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have been MIA for a couple months, but we are back. So, welcome again to another episode of Skoden Talks with the Homies. I am your host, Auntie Sage. IP3 is an organization that provides nonviolent direction action training, campaign strategy, and community organizing tools to support Indigenous communities taking action in defense of their homelands. For more information about IP3 or to send community training requests, you can visit our website at ip3action.org or contact info@ip3action.org. Today we have Kaysa with us today. So welcome everyone. If you want to go ahead and give a little introduction of yourself and we'll move right along.
Yeah, my name is Kaysa. I am half Kiowa and half Absentee Shawnee. On my Absentee Shawnee side, I'm a direct descendant of Chief Tecumseh. On my Kiowa side, I'm a direct descendant of Chief Satanta. I am currently the coalition coordinator for Westwin Resistance. So we're grassroots, indigenous, femme-led, and we're currently fighting against the first critical elements refinery that's being built on the ancestral lands of the Kiowa, Comanche, Apache, Wichita, Delaware, and Caddo.
Hey, well, welcome. I'm so excited. I actually met Kaysa, like 2 years ago, and we found out we are absentee, and it's been a good kiki. So glad to see you again, sister. I'm glad to share space with you, and we'll go ahead and hop into it with some questions. I'd like to ask before we get into it, how did you get into any of the work that you do today? What inspired you to get into your roles that you are in right now?
Um, I I guess like for me personally, I've just always and I don't know, this might be true for all Indigenous children. I kind of think that it is, but when we're really young, we're kind of taught that we don't really have a sense of self, but we have a sense of like ours. We knew at a young age that who we were was representing all Indigenous people and all absentees, all Kiowas, like so I feel like I kind of always grew up with this like really strong like sense of morality of like right and wrong. And then I was always like loud and always screaming around and being like, fuck you, like cut that shit out. And then when I was younger, my grandpa, like he sat me down and he was like, you know, you don't always have to yell. Like you don't always have to go in there rugged. He was like, if people want to listen to you, then they will. And like they'll make the space for your voice to be heard. So I really, after that, like I spent most of my life just kind of being involved in different stuff in like school. And then when I graduated, I got into, yeah, she was like that. Exactly. But when I graduated, I started working in like political organizing. So I organized for a lot of the Democrats. So if you're wondering if I'm that Kaysa, I am. But I really kind of got like jaded, I guess, working within the two-party voter system, and so I stepped away for a long time, for like years. And then Ashley Nicole, she reached out. Blue Jay has entered the chat. Hey. But Ashley Nicole reached out one day and she told me that there was a cobalt refinery that was being built in my hometown. So I was like, what the hell? Like, what do you mean? And so it's like, I saw something. We have like a town like group chat. It's called the Grapevine, but it's kind of where everybody goes to like be rugged. Like you'll see a lot of posts that'll be like, if you're the Chick-fil-A employee with the pink hair, hit me up. misconnections. So I was like, I really didn't take anything in Grapevine seriously for a long time because they're just rugged. And so when I saw that, I thought it was just, the city citying. And then when Ashley reached out, it was like it felt real. And I was like, oh, okay, like this is actually like happening. This is for real, for real. And so she kind of just put everyone that she thought would be interested in like organizing around the refinery in a chat and was just like, hey, do we want to organize? Do we want to do this? And we were all like, yeah. And so we just kind of started working, and for a long time she was very like hands on. And so people kind of like looked at her as like, I guess, the leader, but she was always very adamant of being like, I'm not the leader. Like, if we want to do this, then we're a coalition, and like that means that all of our voices are equal. So it's not, like I'm not in charge, I'm not this, I'm not that. If we're doing this, we are doing this together. And so we kind of took that attitude and adapted that. So when I like, if you look at my title, it's not like president or CEO or supervisor or director or anything, it's coordinator. So it's really what I do is I kind of coordinate for the coalition. But so that's kind of how it all like got started. Was I had made connections while I was political organizing. I had been organizing around Ida's Law. I worked with the MMIP for the Kiowa tribe for a while. And so through that, we had organized around Ida's Law, which is what Ashley was involved in, and I had met her and Seisha and everyone kind of in that circle. And then they kind of just took me in, and I've just been under their wing ever since. Like, so I've worked under Seisha, I've worked under Ashley, like I've gotten to do a lot of things with them, so I'm really grateful. But there's definitely a sisterhood in organizing that I'm very appreciative of.
Awesome. And we have gotten to interview, I believe actually was like one of our first interviewees. And then I got to interview Sasha, I think, when I first stepped in as host. So very cool to have that come around. So I want to ask, how did you get involved with the Westwin Resistance movement? And can you tell us a little bit about your work as the coalition coordinator?
Yeah, so like I said, Ashley kind of just put our group together, and then we started organizing events, and essentially like it just became one of those things where it was like, okay, there's an interview coming up, like there's who's gonna do this, and they'd be like, hey, so do it, like, and they just kept throwing me into things. And so eventually they were like, just take control, eh? And so I was like, okay, like, and so I kind of just created a position for myself, eh? But yeah, I what was the second part of the question?
Um, Tell us a little bit about your work as the coalition coordinator.
Okay. So when that all happened and I kind of just like created my own thing, it was at the behest of Ashley, who was like, essentially they wanted to bring someone in to be like to contract with Honor the Earth. So Honor the Earth has been super dope throughout the whole thing. Like they have really been hands-on in helping us learn how to organize. Because my thing is like I was not like I'm not actually a grassroots organizer. I had some organizing experience politically, but it really is not the same. But so there's different things that we can do. So when I am putting things together for the organization, I want to look like there's media, so things like the podcast and whatnot. But then there's also like mainstream media, and we try to be very conscientious about who we work with within media. Not just because we want people to like report us accurately and stuff, but I feel like Indigenous stories have always kind of been fucked over somehow, like historically. And so it was always important to me to work with people who really wanted to like preserve our voices and to actually like uplift them. And so when I found out that we'd be working with Honor, I was like really excited. And then like through Honor, we've been able to make like contacts with different people. And so that's allowed us to do things like we've been able to host teach-ins. Where we like basically get the community together and just talk about Western, because even within our own community, a lot of people still don't know like what they don't really know what exactly is going on at Western. Like they know it's a thing and that it exists and that they were doing cobalt and now they're not. But like as far as the specifics, a lot of our own citizens really don't know. But the system is set up that way. It's set up to keep people uninformed. So it's one of those things where our job kind of is to be that bridge, that gap in between. So when the information is lost amongst people, it's like we're able to kind of say, no, 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 like you're not going to gaslight them because you did in fact say this on this date at this time, and here's the video.
Fact
So
check.
we kind of that part. So we definitely do resistance work like that way with like kind of directly acting on behalf of the people and like helping to educate. But we also are able to like just organize at city council. Like I go to almost every city council meeting because I don't know. I like to make them look at my face. I also like to try to make our mayor turn red and make him say cease and desist. So it's like I don't know. I enjoy organizing around city council mostly because they've made our life a living hell for the last few years. So I'm like, no, get it back. You're out of order. But we
Like, we got to
also
bring balance, darling. It's your turn. Like,
that part. We also are like trying to, facilitate real conversations around what land back looks like, around what sovereignty looks like within our nations. True sovereignty, not like, just whatever the textbook definition is. And so I don't know. I feel like our coalition kind of started specifically like around Westwind, and it just kind of grew into really being more of like a hub for like Indigenous people in the community who want to be active, and I mean for other community members. But there's just something that's like really comforting whenever you like click on your screen and you're like scrolling through, and then there's an Indigenous face, and you're like, wait a minute. I got them cheekbones too. Nay. So I don't know. I think our job right now is to just like take up space and to just like not let them get away with any of it. And so that's kind of what we've been doing.
well, you're definitely making moves and you're definitely staying woke. Before the interview, I had a little bit of knowledge of what Westman was, but now everybody's like, you didn't know about this? I was like, what? So I had to do my research a little bit, but I'm really glad and proud of you because you have done some amazing things so far. So I will move to the next question. Oh, also to our viewers, if y'all have any questions for Kaysa, put them in the chat and we'll have them read and we'll have them answered as soon as they get done with any of the questions that we're talking to. So definitely, we are open for all questions and interactions. Or if y'all want to holler and leave a number, go ahead and do that.
Yo, ring it.
All right. So our next question is, what is going on currently with Westwin Elements, and are they still moving forward with their plans to build the first nickel refinery on Turtle Island?
um, so technically, they kind of already have. So essentially, what happened is when Westwind was first proposed as a project, and it was essentially Westwind and the city who came together. So there's three entities that would have been involved, and this is kind of how every municipality is set up. So you can look to see in your own cities what it would look like. So you would have city council, which was one of the entities, and then usually your county will have some sort of industrial development authority. So we're Comanche County, so ours is CCIDA. And then we have Lawton Economic Development Authority. And so if you look at your town, you should see that you'll have some sort of economic development authority. And then we have LEDC, and so that is Latin Economic Development Corporation. And so essentially what happened was when Westwin Elements and the city came together, they had this big idea of this full scale refinery that was going to be hundreds of acres, and it was going to be this huge, huge pipe dream basically. And so they came together, they went to the bank, And the bank essentially looked at the size of the refinery that they wanted to build, compared it to the amount of money that they had raised, and the bank said, "Oh, who down? Who's signing this check? Y'all broke." They said, "No, no, no, wrap it up, wrap it up. We got to figure something else out here because this not going to work." And so they said, "Okay, well, here's what we'll do instead. We'll do a pilot facility." So essentially, they started with a small scale. So it's kind of like a R&D facility, or like research and discovery. Like if you essentially what it is it's they have like one set of machines in there where they can essentially do proof of concept, so they can actually show that they can refine these materials. And then they essentially like they let if students are needing to learn to use the machinery, they could go there. If people are new employees and they're needing to learn, then they can go there before they would have to go to the full scale. So it kind of exists as like its own like smaller like small scale refinery. Um, so they are technically capable of refining nickel currently. However, I guess the next phase would be to move into what's known as like a commercial facility. So that's when the big dogs come in. Think like an Amazon warehouse type shit.
Mm. Wow. Um, what dangers does the Westwin Elements refinery present for the land, water, and residents in Lawton?
How long do we have again?
We have all the time you want, darling. We are on your time.
Um, no, like really honestly, like the when I first started, so I feel like when you think about like a refinery or mining or anything industrial, there are certain things that you can kind of think of naturally that would be an issue. So you would think of like water. So essentially, like any water that they use that would be in contact with metals would have to get discharged somewhere. So where that would be is what's known as like the wastewater treatment plant. So every city should have a wastewater treatment plant. And if you don't have a wastewater treatment plant, that means your city is teeny tiny, and so you probably get your water shipped in from somebody. So someone somewhere near you has one. But essentially, what they do is they take that water, they treat it, and they recycle it, and that gets kind of pushed back into our water towers. And so then they set in the water towers, and then essentially it gets funneled back in by the city. And so the way that ours is set up, it's so old and it's so run down that they can't just go in and fix a couple pieces and it's back like within code. Instead, they have to replace the whole building piece by piece, section by section, and it's not going to be done until like 2075. Yeah, so infrastructurally, our city is legitimately not prepared to have something like this. Starting with water. And then with land, we have, there was, so there's been an argument about whether or not there was actually an environmental impact study that was completed. We have asked several times if there was, and essentially what we got was a one pager from the Comanche County Industrial Development Authority, who essentially put up a report from Garver that said that they worked with the Oklahoma Survey Association or Archaeology Association or something like that, and that essentially they determined that a field study wasn't necessary. And so I don't really know if one has ever legitimately been completed. What I do know is that when Westwin was first proposed to the city, they were actually partnered with a company called CVMR. And so they have essentially like this is Westwin's very first project. The CEO has literally zero experience in the field of refining or metallurgy. Um, so she literally doesn't have the background to be able to talk about this with anyone. And so we've asked Westwind several times for answers to our questions. We've never gotten them. We've gone to city council, we've gone to Lita, we just had a meeting with Lita yesterday. But essentially when they came together, they were like partnered. And when they like, I guess at some point the partnership like dissolved. And so when that partnership dissolved, it was like essentially the companies broke up. And so Westwing got the house, and so they stayed here. And then essentially CVMR had to move out, so they moved to Amarillo. And so then when something like when something like that happens, essentially both parties will usually agree to just leave me alone and I'll leave you alone. And so I guess they had kind of that understanding, and then next thing you know, Westwind like slapped them with a lawsuit. So because of that lawsuit, CVMR thought that it was appropriate to meet with us. And so they actually like met with me, and I was able to kind of ask them directly some of our questions. And so I had asked them specifically the like about the water, because essentially CVMR, like they have like almost 40 years of experience within metallurgy and refining. They're Canadian based, like they literally are already doing it right now. So I'm anti-industry myself, so I'll never really be on the same side as them, but I can at least look at something on paper and go, oh, 40 years of experience versus 0 years of experience. Okay, I probably know which one I'm gonna trust. But when, or at least trust in the sense of like who's telling the truth in this situation, not necessarily trust with my lands, but you know what I mean. But so when, I guess like when the, when we met with them, it kind of seemed like the plan was always to have more than one pilot plant. And it seemed like it was basically going to be like six different pilot plants, and then essentially they would collect the data from those six, and then that would, I guess, prove in a way that the infrastructure was there to at least attempt a commercial facility. And so when we're talking about like environmental concerns, I feel like there's certain ones that you can look at, like what we talked about with the water, where to me that's like a very logical, you could research that and find that and follow that logic. But then there's, once you start getting deep into this and you start actually talking to like subject matter experts and technical experts and things like that, there's a whole other aspect of this refinery, of this proposed refinery, that would be experimental. And like when I spoke with CVMR, who literally have like decades of experience in this, they essentially told me like, yeah, it is, it's experimental, like it's experimental in the sense that it hasn't been done full scale to refine cobalt. But our city approved like for Westwind to be able to refine cobalt from the very beginning. And so our concerns are not just environmental, like it's not with the land, with the we have like within a quarter of a mile of the facility, we have Deo Mission Church, which was the first church that was given to the Comanches. So we have a lot of our ancestors that are buried there. And if something like this were to go through, and let's say that there was some sort of act of God that had happened, then it leads for the potential for our ancestors to be able to possibly be marked as like bio-waste. And so we wanted to ask like who who uh who approved this? Like what, how are we going to mitigate this? Like what, how do we keep this from happening? And when we talked to CVMR, it was like it seemed like even they thought that the location for the refinery was weird. And when I asked him why, I was like, so I don't know the government name out of for what I'm talking about. I said, but what I know is that when these thermal, so essentially what would happen is when they're actually refining material, at some point the thermal oxidizers. Like if something is in the air that is detected on their readers, then at some point that thermal oxidizer will kick in. Allegedly, it's supposed to be immediately. And when it kicks in, then all of the bad will be pushed through a thermal oxidizer, and then essentially a release will be in the air of like clean air. And so when something like that happens, because heat is used, it causes an updraft. And so when that updraft happens, essentially, like if it's in the summer, then something like that wouldn't be an issue because it would be hot on hot. But if it's in the middle of winter and now you have like this huge updraft mixing with cold air, you've now created the perfect like kind of culmination for the potential to have winter storms for people who are downwind of you. So there's aspects like that that are like really experimental, and we've asked all over our city officials through every entity that we could to be able to have some of the concerns addressed, and we haven't been able to yet. But there's a lot. I mean, you know, the city of
And
Lawton
if,
is
and
set
if y'all
up.
don't know anything about Oklahoma weather, that's not good for us. Like,
Right.
and especially where
Yeah,
Lawton is, they're right on the turnpike, and that's where a tornado alley is. So yeah, that's not good. Like,
at all. And like with the air, like we only have one air monitoring station for our entire city. And where Westwin is being built, it is on like the far west southwest side of our city. And the air monitoring station would essentially be on the far northeast side. And so it's literally not in an ideal situation to be able to actually catch like the wind. But when I first like started with this, I didn't really know how air monitoring worked. I thought it was gonna be like on Ghostbusters where they're looking for a ghost and it's like beep 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 beep, and then it would be like cobalt detected or something like that. But it's not actually how it works, which I feel like is boring. But apparently what it is that these air monitoring stations will look for what's called particulate matter or PM. And so the heavier the metal, then the more like of the particular matter that'll be in the air. And so essentially what they would be able to do is not necessarily identify exactly what's in the air in the sense that it's not going to say cobalt in the air. What they could do is look at the particulate matter and essentially closely correlate it to whatever would read that way. And so if that was cobalt, if it was nickel or whatever, then they could isolate it that way. So what we have always said is that essentially our city, they want this entire area of our city to be what's known as the industrial zone. And that is something that came down from like Stitt, and that's something that now that Trump is in office, he's gonna like really push for that now. But Stitt wants our entire state to be an industrial like state. He wants us to be like the next Detroit. But like when they are doing stuff like this, like they want our whole entire industry, like part of the city to be, like this one specific part to be industrial, but none of the companies that are there are actually like being required to do what would be called like fence line monitoring or perimeter monitoring. And so essentially like what that means is that instead of waiting for the air monitoring stations to be able to catch it, there would be monitoring stations that would monitor right where they are and essentially their perimeter. And so we would get direct readings for to know exactly what's coming off of these properties. And so when we brought this information to Westwind, essentially we got a response from this guy who used to act as like Westwind's spokesperson for the community. Hey, you don't speak for me. Hey, get over here, colonizer. You're not welcome here. Hey. But he would like come and he would tell us like, well, Westwind's gonna do that. They're gonna do that, and they're gonna publicly release the data. And I'm like, okay, bet. When? Where are they gonna put the data? Give me the website right now. and then it was like he would just kind of skirt around it, like, we never have seen that come to fruition. So it's like even when we do have like these concerns and we take them, it's like they don't really get addressed. They all just kind of get pushed to the side. But anyways, so yeah, you guys can definitely go on our social media though, and we break down a lot of our concerns. I could talk about the craziness with Western all day, so I won't get too into it. But yeah, it's definitely there are definitely some environmental concerns when it comes to land, air, and water. Water, obviously, we don't want things running off into our creeks and rivers, which our city is already doing. So we were actually a part of busting our city. So essentially what happened was we got a call. Like I said, we started out really centered around and being like heavily Westwind focused. And then we kind of just became like the hub for Indigenous news. All the gossip, but so somebody messaged me one day, like, and it's so crazy because, like, I be gardening. So I was like sitting on my bed, I'm holding my little garden tool and doing my thing, like Winnie the Pooh with just my shirt on, watching my shows, kikiing with my auntie. And then it's like all of a sudden we'll get these like life-changing messages, like, or not necessarily life-changing, but it'll be these huge breaks in the cases that we were like looking for. And so we got a message one day that said that the city had been dumping, they said that it was solid waste into our creeks, which lead into the Red River. And so when we looked into it, what we were actually able to prove was that it wasn't solid waste. What it was partially treated effluent. And we were able to kind of expose that apparently a lot of the cities along the area actually dump partially treated effluent into our creeks and rivers. And so we were able to, we went out there and we took our own water samples and we like labeled them. And then one of our coalition members, she and her husband are like scientists and they've worked in labs before, so they knew like kind of what to test for. And so they took it and they got all of the samples, like essentially done, tested. And then when she got them tested, they came back, and when they came back, they had really high counts of E. coli, like in the billions counts, like six digits, or six digits at least. So there there are definitely ways in which E. coli could occur naturally within our waterways. Like if a bear shits in the creek, you're probably going to have a little E. coli in it. But in order for that much E. coli to be in the creeks, like it would literally have to be like an army of bears shitting in the creek, like directly, and we would have to test it like that. So it's one of those things where it's like clearly that is an indicator that there was, human waste, human. And so we've when we found that out, we were able to get it released to the media, and the media then took it and put it, like they started putting stories out. And so at the time that they were doing that, we had reported that to ODEQ, which is the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality. We sent them our samples and all this kind of stuff. And so basically, like, they messaged us back and they were like, gardening with a hoe, LOL. Sure. So, when when they like came back, um and we got the like test results, we were like, okay, what's next? And so they like message us and they're like, the next thing is that we need to actually prove that it's the city of Lawton. ODQ is the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality. So they were like, we need to actually prove that it's the city of Lawton because right now, like it's just essentially anyone could say anything is what they were saying. They were like, and because so many people are dumping, there's no way to prove that it's like actually Lawton. And so I was like, well, I was like, so I was like, I'm absentee and we grew up in Little Lacs and we all got land out there. And I know that there's these trail cams that you could put out there and like they're just, they're solar. So like we don't have to do anything really. And I was like, so we should just put them out there. I was like, and a lot of them are motion censored. And so whenever whenever I said that, everybody was like, "Yeah, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it." And I was like, "Okay, so who paying?" Dang! And then everybody went quiet. I was like, "Oh hell nah!" I got stuck with the bill and the idea. This is some shit. I was like, "We getting one. We getting one camera." So we did. We went to Walmart and I bought us one little camera and we took it out there. We set it up and we were able to like. I mean, I don't think I've ever said this publicly, but we were able to catch people dumping, and then we were able to essentially take that and report that back to ODEQ. And then essentially NOVs were issued where they were like, nah, this was you, cuz. This was you playing. We seen it. So, it's kind of one of those things where it's like we've evolved, I guess, in a sense. And at the time, it didn't seem related. But now, as things are starting to unfold, like and pieces of the puzzle are starting to come to play, it's like we're seeing how much was really related. And it was crazy that we all were kind of holding a piece, and when you stick it together, like it all starts making sense. You're like, oh, so that's why they did that. Oh, that's why they scheduled that meeting with me at that time. They was trying to keep me from going to that meeting over there. Like, so it's definitely been interesting. There are definitely concerns. You can go into our socials and really see it in depth. But yeah, sorry, I don't. I'm telling you, I could talk about it
No,
all day.
we're here for it. This is what this interview is for because we want to hear all about it, and hopefully we can get you some more people on the team. You never know.
Yeah.
So next question to go with that before we switch gears. I understand that there's active litigation between CVMR Corporation and Westwin Elements. Can you speak on the lawsuit and counterclaims between Westwin Resistance and CVMR Corporation?
Yeah. So there's definitely active litigation. So essentially what happened was when Westwin was first you're throwing my shit everywhere. When Westwin was first proposed to the citizens, like I said, they were partnered with CVMR. And so at some point that partnership dissolved. And so what I can tell you about how that happened is the pieces of the lore that I've been able to put together, just from research and things. And what we're working on now is trying to put like a timeline together from both of the lawsuits so we can really see when this stuff correlates. But so essentially, what we know is that Westwin Incorporated in 2022, they incorporated in I believe it was September of 2022. And when they incorporated with CVMR as like a partner. So it was like a mesh of their names. It was like CVMR dash Westwin slash CVMR. Like, you know what I mean? Like they had tried to basically so no one could patent anything like around any culmination of their names. But so when they incorporated in 2022, that was what kind of started that partnership. And so what we found out is that by like February of 2023, the partnership had dissolved. And so it was literally like half a year that went in between the two. And so when that partnership dissolved, like I said, when they broke up, Westwing got the house, so they stayed, and then CBMR went somewhere else. And so, like 2 years later, Westwind drops this lawsuit, and with the lawsuit, they essentially are saying that CVMR frauded them out of $3 million. because they say that they paid CVMR roughly $3 million to complete what's known as a bankable feasibility study. So essentially, a bankable feasibility study is something that a business would get to prove to a bank that they could actually follow through with whatever the proposed idea is. And that essentially, if they can come to the agreement and the terms are met or the deliverables are there, then that company would get money from the bank. And so that's essentially what Westwin wanted from CVMR. And Westwin alleges that CVMR said, yeah, we could do that. And then they weren't able to do it. And Westwin alleges that, so when this was proposed, the whole reason why Westwin and CVMR even partnered together is because CVMR, as a corporation, owns patents for what's known as a closed loop processing system. So previously, when people would refine like nickel or copper, things like that, lithium, whatever it was, they would do things like running it through an acid wash. And essentially, will, they would do a lot of really shitty shit that was really bad for the environment. And that's how we would end up getting Superfund sites like Tar Creek and things like that. So what's supposed to make this closed loop processing different is that it's supposed to be what's known as environmentally neutral. And so essentially what it means is that even it would essentially have a minimal carbon footprint is essentially what they're claiming. So Westwind says that when it comes to the technology for the closed loop processing, that the entity CVMR doesn't actually own the patents, but that it actually belonged to an engineer that was formerly associated with CVMR. And so, what I happen to know at the time in which that lawsuit came out is that CVMR has a former employee named Dmitry Terekov, who essentially went from CVMR to Western Elements. And so I was like, okay, interesting. So in my mind though, I was like, so if this is true, and Westwind did all of these things, or Westwind is claiming that CVMR did these things, then it would make sense to me that Westwind would sue. What didn't make sense to me was that CVMR would let Westwind say all of these things and they just didn't have nothing to say. That didn't make any sense to me. I mean, Westwind was basically sitting there for months, who gonna check me, boo? And CVMR was just letting them run at the mouth. And so I was like, this just doesn't make sense to me. Something's clearly up. And so what we got from that was there's a tribal leader who has really really stepped up and has been trying to help us get some of the answers and organize around fighting against Westwind. Um, I really appreciate the things that he does and for us, and that he sees the effort that we put in. He'll tell you himself that grassroots organizing is sometimes our first line of defense, and so he's very supportive of our work. And so he reached out to me and he was like, hey, CVMR wants to meet with me. And so I just want to know, do you have any questions that you want me to ask? And I'll just go in and ask them and we'll see what they say. So I was like, okay, yeah, just tell me when you're going to meet and, I'll get you something before the meeting. And he was like, okay, I'll keep you posted. So I was like, all right. So a couple weeks go by, I'm not really thinking anything of it. And so then I'm in my Winnie the Pooh era trying to start my day, and all of a sudden my phone rings and it's this tribal leader, and I was like, whoa. O'clock in the morning on a Friday afternoon. Uh, or on a Friday, I was like, what do I do? What do I do? And so I just let it ring because I was so nervous. I was like, whoa, why is he calling me? And so then he sends me a message and he's like, hey, CVMR is in town and they're in town today and today only, and they want to meet with you. And I was like, what? And so he was like, yeah, he said that apparently they saw your video and they know you have some questions. And so I was like, okay. So essentially what happened was that when the Westwin lawsuit dropped, I made a video and put it on our TikTok where I had just kind of walked through the aspects of the lawsuit. And I was pointing out like this doesn't add up, or like, this doesn't make sense, or how is this? And so I had a lot of questions in the video. So I guess CVMR saw that somehow and I guess reached out to the chairman and they made the connection. And so we were able to meet directly with CVMR. And when we met with him, he was like, well, clearly you put out a lot of questions online that you have, so ask away. And I was like, you want me to just ask? He was like, yeah. And I was like, okay. So, like, I was ready to get into it. But so, when we spoke with him, and that's really the difference between CVMR and Westwin, is that we've tried to speak with Westwin directly and they won't even give us the time of day. But CVMR reached out to us and asked and met with us in person and bought us lunch. When I was on the phone with him, he was like, it'll be me and the CFO. We'll be in light jackets. I was like, okay, I'll be the only native in Cracker Barrel. Sure enough, I was too. I was like, God. But like when we met, what we found out is essentially like their side of the story, which made a little more sense. When you start putting the pieces together, it makes a little more sense. And so essentially the whole lawsuit really centers around this patented technology, the feasibility study, and then the 3 million that was paid for the feasibility study. And so essentially what we are told is that when Westwin asked CVMR to provide the feasibility study. Apparently, there's like 4 stages that you have to go through. And so, essentially, like the first stage is just like a rudimentary budget. So, it's like, think if you're just sitting down, you're like, okay, wait, can I actually go out tonight? And you're just trying to remember your bills. You're like, okay, I got this. So, I'll probably only have like $50. That's a couple drinks. Let's go. So that is essentially like the first stage where it's like rudimentary, like, okay, this is what we could do. Then the next stage is where you sit down and you really start going through your expenses, like line by line, trying to figure out if you can legitimately pull this off. And then essentially the third stage is where you put it all together in a report and you take it to someone from the bank, but not necessarily the person who's going to decide on if they're going to essentially accept your study. So then they essentially go through it and they say, okay, you're missing this, or this is good, but we still need blah, 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 or no, this is great, like move forward. And then they'll pass you through to the fourth stage, which is where you essentially meet, present your stuff, and then you wait for your determination. And so what he said was that with the first stage, they couldn't even get past that because in order to do the bankable feasibility study, the first thing that you ask is, okay, well, what are you refining? And he said that that's important to know because one, you have to know how much it's going to cost per unit. He said then you have to be able to actually figure out how much it's going to cost to transport it from wherever you're going to get it from to wherever you're going to refine it. And then you have to make sure that there's something in place so that you can actually transport it. And then once you get it there, you have to get it off the truck, the train, whatever. So something, usually it's a crane arm, but something has to do that, and that has to be built by someone. And then essentially after that, you are able to then go into refining. And then after you refine, then you have to be able to transport that back out. And so he was like, literally, the first step is what are you refining and how much is it going to cost per unit? And she could not answer that because I believe that she doesn't actually have a supplier for feedstock for a commercial scale. Because who in the world is going to let her do that? And so she went, like, theoretically, you would go through the Congo for cobalt because they're like the biggest supplier of cobalt in the world. And if you're not aware of the human crisis that's going on in the Congo around cobalt, then I would highly suggest you look into that. But that's one of the reasons why we do not want to perpetuate this industry, is because we don't want to perpetuate the human violence that's happening there. But essentially, CVMR alleges that Westwin slash Kaylee Long told CVMR that they had what's called like a critical minerals like promissory note, essentially. So it was essentially this thing that exists in what realm I'm unaware of, but apparently it exists somewhere out there. And it essentially says that the president of the Congo is going to give Kaylee Long like access to cobalt from the Congo. And so CVMR alleges that that was a lie. And they kind of just essentially counter. And so what we find out is there was actually two former CVMR employees who are now working for Westwin, and that the technology actually belongs to CVMR, but that the two employees are authors. And so essentially they believe that Westwin is using their patented technology to refine now, and that essentially that's what they're suing for, is like an infringement on those patents. And then they're saying that the employees broke what would be like a non-disclosure agreement, and then also that Kaylee broke what would be a non-disclosure agreement because she poached the two people. And so it honestly is a soap opera, and I could go into, we'd be here for another hour if you really want me to go through it, but that's really what it surrounds, is the 3 million, the bankable feasibility study, and then the patented technology.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Yeah, I had someone else. I was like, tune in. We will get down to the bottom of this. I was like, because weren't really too sure on it ourselves, but now we know. There's the tea, darlings. There's the tea. We did have a question I wanted to touch on. I don't know if you can or can't, but Miss Williams asked, supposedly Stitt has approved the turnpike to be built, which will go through our tribal lands. Is that true? And if so, is there anything legally that the heirs can do about it? I don't know if you can touch on that or if you know have any knowledge of it, but
I do know that there was definitely a plan in place for something like that to occur. I don't know if that has been greenlit or not. I would say that if you are legitimately interested in organizing around stopping something like that from happening, and I would say that this is true about anything. You know, if you're an Indigenous person and you're wanting to organize or get started, then I would say to just like start asking questions, like, you know what I mean? But ask the right people. So, go to your state legislatures, or if you can find something that actually says, like, hey, yes, this is happening, then you could even message that reporter and say, hey, I read your story on such and such. Is this true? Like, can you offer me any information? And then once you're ready to organize, like, you can always reach out to other Indigenous orgs like IP3, Honor the Earth, NOA. Like, there are a ton of organizers or organizing facilities out there who will help you learn how to organize and get it up off the ground. So I would say if you really want to know, start asking questions, get to the bottom of it.
call
Make it a case.
Kaysa. Call Kaysa.
Right.
I'm like, catch a Kaysa. Catch a Kaysa.
Catch a Kaysa.
Um, one quick thing we want to talk about and touch on about something you mentioned in your bio. You mentioned that you grew up in foster care. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in foster care and how it helps inform your work as a land defender and water protector in the movement?
Yeah. So I would say that there's a couple ways that it's really helped me. Um, I did grow up in foster care. I moved around for a lot of my life. Because I moved around so much, I feel like I really developed my voice at a young age. I learned how to advocate for myself at a young age. You know, I was in therapy from, well, probably longer than I could really remember. I've probably been in therapy longer than I've been out of therapy. But I feel like when I really started organizing, one thing that helped me was that interpersonal like aspect of it. I I see through a lot of the bullshit because I've spent so much of my life having to see through the bullshit. When there are a lot of foster families out there that are not safe, even though they seem like they should be. So learning that discernment at a young age of like, yes, this is a safe person. No, this isn't. It really helped. I feel like it really helped hone my bullshit meter. That really helps me within these meetings because it's like, and I might not say it to them in the meeting. Sometimes I do, but I might not always. But it's one of those things where we'll walk away and we'll be talking as a coalition, and they'll be like, I always ask people, so what do you think of the meeting, or like, how did you feel after we spoke to that person, and I'll wait to see if like anyone else like really picked up on it, and then I'll be like, well, I think they were lying, and this is why. And a lot of times I'm right. Is the thing is, it's like it really does help me navigate. And then I feel like because I found my voice at a young age, that really helped me with public speaking. That helped me to be able to just like sit here and talk. But um I also feel like Indigenous people, I feel like all Indigenous people are neurodivergent in the sense that we literally operate neurologically in a diverged path than what I feel like a lot of people do. And one of those things is that, and I feel like all natives are kind of like this, like we're jack of all trades but master of none. Like we pick up on shit like real fast though, like we really do. I mean, I got uncles that could basically be scientists at NASA, but instead they're out fixing cars. Probably got your auntie's car in their yard right now. But so it's one of those things where it's like I guess just I feel like as Indigenous people we really do we have this way that our mind works where we're able to really piece how things are operating or how it could potentially play out. And so I feel like because I have that, it has really helped me to be able to say, okay, so if they're doing this, then essentially that means that they could really only go this way or that way. And so if they go this way, we'll do this. If they go that way, we'll do this. And like, so it helps me to kind of like prepare, I guess, like not 7 generations out, but maybe 7 movements out. It's still that same kind of like concept. Um, and then, yeah, I think just, I think there's a kind of a genetic aspect of it too. Both of my ancestors, like on both sides of my lineage, my family has histories of being like orators, of being chiefs, being able to lead people in a moment in which a leader was needed. And so I feel like there is a genetic aspect to it where, maybe some of those things did get passed down to me. And so, yeah, I think being in foster care helped me understand nature versus nurture. Oh, in depth, I guess.
Yeah, awesome. For those in our community who have also grew up in foster care, what advice or encouragement would you give to help other kids still finding their way and to get involved in direct action work?
Um, I would say that everyone, no matter what, has to do what feels right within your soul. So if something in you is telling you this is not right and you need to stand up, then I would suggest you listen to that because listening to that it might not be the thing that gives you the big break, but what it might be is the thing that puts you in the room with the person who could potentially give you the big break. Or not the big break, but essentially like, through the relationships that we've formed in listening to ourselves, we've been able to be put in the rooms with people who were able to open doors for us to be able to get information that I feel like the average citizen doesn't have access to. And really, if you look at it fundamentally, there's nothing that like legitimately is outstanding or special about me. Like, I am someone who grew up in foster care. So I am community raised, like literally my aunties, my uncles, my cousins, my brothers, like everyone had a hand in helping me. Strangers, like they all raised me. So there's really nothing that separates me from anyone else. So the reality is that like if I can listen to myself and I can find that path, then anyone can. And I feel like if you act out of fear, then you limit the places that you can go. And I think it's scary being in Indigenous spaces as someone who didn't grow up with your Indigenous culture being as prevalent in your life. I think it is scary being in those moments because you feel like you have to prove to your other Indigenous kin that you're like you are a part of them. And so I would say that if you're in that mindset, or if it's like that's something that you're struggling with, then I would really look. I would really ask you to look inside yourself and ask where that insecurity is coming from, because I can promise you it's probably not coming from the outside. What I've really learned about Indigenous people is they're very, very loving and accepting. And if you're you and Digi, like you with us, like it's very much a community, and everyone has a different path that they've been on to get to where we all are. So if your paths merge, then they were meant to merge for a reason, or at least I believe. So I believe every like relationship you can find something to learn out of, and that will help you move forward. So I wouldn't let fear keep you from being involved in your culture. Everyone has to start somewhere. Like everyone has to. You just started at an older age. That just means you're gonna be able to pick out your fabrics on your own. You're gonna be cute. So just do it.
Touche, touche. Well, we are coming to an end of our interview, and I thank you so much. Just your words, I love listening to you, and maybe we might have to do a part two. I don't know. We'll
Okay.
see. Just to do a catch up to see if we have anything else. But before we end, I always ask my guests: is there a favorite native dish that you like to eat, or that you love to cook?
Hmm. I don't know that there's one that I like to cook just because I'm queen of the hard fry bread club. But there is one that I like to eat. I like any sort of dish that's made from like Wichita squash. My friend Shelby, she brought me some Wichita squash, and I got my cousin to come up and like make some dishes. She made like a sweet potato pie, but it was like Wichita squash instead of sweet potato. So good. So I don't know. That might be my new fave this year. Might have to grow me some.
If I
But
come
yeah,
visit, that's what I want to try. I want to come try that.
I'll get her here. Hey, I'll make it happen.
Okay, well, if there's anything else you would like to highlight, plug, if there's any ways that we can uplift your work, any social medias that we need to check out, or if there's any way we can donate to your cause, now's your time. Let us know.
Yeah, so we definitely have socials. We are on Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Facebook. I think we still have an X page, but I don't think we really post to it anymore. But you can follow us on any of those. It'll all be under Westwin Resistance. We do have options to donate. We are currently working to get a legal assessment done, so that we can find out what our actual like legal paths forward are. So that's kind of what we're using the donations to save up for now. So the donation links can be found on our socials.
Okay. Uh, all right. Well, thank you again for your time. It has been a pleasure talking with you, and I wish you the best. So, yeah, we will talk to you again soon, and you have a lovely evening, darling.
Thank you, you too.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another Skoden Talks with the Homies with your Auntie Sage and Kaysa. We'll see you next time.